And I call the member for Shortland.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, there's been much reflection in this place and about this place in the last week about morality and ethics. It's been on the front page of the papers for the last week, and I want to use my time today to talk about, I think, one of the most fundamental parts of morality, an obligation that all of us have, which is to leave this planet a better place than we found it, whether you're a Christian, an atheist, a Jew, a Muslim, whatever. I think the fundamental tenet of most ethical teaching is to improve your world, to leave the world a better place for your children and grandchildren if you're lucky enough to have a family. And that brings me to climate change, which I think is the greatest example of that obligation now, Mr Speaker. And today I had the honour and privilege of meeting with a delegation of teachers and activists from Kiribati. Kiribati is a small network of islands in the Pacific. It has 120,000 people in it, so roughly the size of one of our electorates. It is 2 to 3 metres above sea level and is less than 100 metres wide in most places. And this delegation of brave, passionate people were pleading with politicians in this place to help save their nation, a nation that is at the forefront of the impact of climate change. I talked with Claire, a teacher, about water salinity issues, the fact that because of rising sea levels due to climate change, their wells that they get their drinking water from are being poisoned by salt water. She talked about how access to drinking water is a fundamental human right. I talked to another teacher about schools being washed away and about flood damage and the drastic damage to taro crops, which is their staple diet in Kiribati. I talked to Debbie, who works for their sporting commission, about sporting fields being lost and the loss of potential sporting champions. And I talked to Maria, who made the point that this is one of the poorest nations on earth, and yet they are suffering what, quite frankly, is the outcome from industrialisation around the world, an industrialisation that's lifted billions of people out of poverty, but at the same time has spewed carbon dioxide into the air, causing the greenhouse gas warming that we're seeing right now. And it is in this context, Mr Speaker, that I talk about the existential threat to Kiribati and other islands in the Pacific and how we have a moral obligation to do our part. We're the 12th largest polluter in absolute terms, Mr Speaker, but we're the highest per capita in the developed world. Let me repeat that. We emit more greenhouse gas emissions per person in the developed world. We have a moral obligation to do our part in this global challenge to combat climate change and to save nations like Kiribati. And it's in this context that I rail against our woeful target. Our target of 26% of emissions reduction by 2030, the government's official target, is woefully inadequate. And what's worse, Mr Speaker, is that we have no hope on current policies of meeting it. The government's own emissions projections say they will not meet that woefully inadequate target. And it's the people of Kiribati who will be suffering because of that result. The Labor Party has a much stronger contribution, an emissions reduction target of 45% by 2030, with net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which is in line with the Climate Change Authority's recommendations and in line with what other developed nations in the world, such as the UK and Germany, are doing. And we have a concrete plan to achieve it, Mr Speaker. And I don't talk about our policy as a way of playing us versus them. This is an issue that should unite this parliament. It's united parliaments in Germany. It's united the Parliament in the United Kingdom, where it is not a political issue. And so this week, when issues of morality and ethics will no doubt dominate the headlines, will no doubt dominate question time every day, I urge everyone just to reflect on our obligation to leave this planet a better place than when we found it, an obligation to hand to our kids and grandkids a better situation than we inherited. And I think our generation could be the first one that doesn't leave it a better place, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I urge everyone to play their part, be passionate, campaign for concrete action on climate change, because we owe it to our brothers and sisters in Kiribati, we owe it to our kids and grandkids, and we owe it to every human being on this planet to do just that.
Yeah.